Brought to you by Penguin.
The Spitfire Girls, written by Jenny Holmes, read by Colleen Prendergast. Chapter 1. September 1943. "Hold on to your hat!" Lillian Watkins yelled at Mary Holland as the merry-go-round at Highcliffe Fair eased forward. Sitting side-saddle on her gaily painted horse, Mary jammed her forage cap more firmly over her forehead. She held tight to the pole with her left hand and grinned over her shoulder at her fellow ATA driver, who had failed to take her own advice and now squealed with dismay as her hat was dislodged by a sudden rise into the air. The cap fell to the floor beneath Lillian's prancing stallion's hooves. Her carefully curled fair hair blew into her eyes as she leaned sideways to retrieve it. "Here, let me." A lad in Navy Ratings uniform beat Lillian to it. Jumping from his horse, he nipped underneath her rising mount and rescued her hat, then handed it to her with a wink and a mock salute. "Lillian Watkins, you did that on purpose." Mary challenged her friend above the hurdy-gurdy music and the low rumble of the engine that propelled them forward. "I know you did." Lillian grinned. On they soared astride their lacquered, wild-eyed chargers, high in the air then dipping low, with the laughing sailor back on his horse and stretching out to offer Lillian a cigarette. Observers on the ground smiled and waved at the riders, eager for their own turns, while the stony-faced operator in her pay booth cast a disapproving eye over the sailors and Lillian's shenanigans. "Is that it?" the nimble Navy man cried as, all too soon, the ride slowed and came to an end. "That's never worth threepence." "Hear, hear," Lillian agreed. She let her skirt slide up to within an inch of her stocking tops as she slipped from her mount. The operator's take-it-or-leave-it shrug told them there was no point arguing. Before they knew it, fresh riders had swarmed onto the platform to take their places, and Mary, Lillian, and her new acquaintance stood aimlessly on the muddy grass. "Tom Robbins," the sailor introduced himself. He seemed a cocksure chap, with shoulders back and chest out. "But it's Spanner to my friends. I'm a mechanic, on board one of His Majesty's merchant ships," he explained. "I've got 12 hours shore leave, and I'm ready and willing to make the most of every minute." "Pleased to meet you, Spanner." Lillian leaned in for a light for a cigarette. "Mary and I belong to the ATA, in case you were wondering. But you can already tell by our uniform." She ran a hand lightly down her front, over her dark blue jacket, tightly belted at the waist, and her matching skirt. Then she ostentatiously straightened her black tie. "Like a woodbine?" Spanner asked Mary, who shook her head. It was obvious that 3 was a crowd. Lillian and her sailor boy had already linked arms and were sauntering past the dodgems towards the shooting gallery. "Anything to anywhere. That's what ATA stands for, isn't it?" Spanner quipped as they walked along. Lillian jabbed him with her elbow. "Air Transport Auxiliary, I'll have you know." "Is that right? You mean you two Atta Girls do your bit for the war effort by hurtling through the air in Spitfires and the like?" Spanner was clearly impressed as he anchored Lillian's arm around his waist. "I should coco," Lillian exclaimed. "We leave that to the Lucinda Chumley Smythes of this world, don't we, Mary? We're just drivers who taxi the pilots back to the ferry pool at Rixley. We let the toffee-nosed daredevils of this world do the flying, ta very much." For a while Mary listened to their chatter, then chose to lag behind. Soon the brash music and the stallholders' cries drowned out Lillian and her brand-new beau's teasing voices. This was the last Mary would see of her friend all evening, she forecast, as she watched their back views disappear under the red and white striped awning of the shooting gallery. She breathed in the sweet, earthy smell of trampled grass, heard the dull thump of dodgem cars colliding, and watched sparks fly from the overhead mesh. "Got a light, love?" a man asked as she walked.
"Sample complete." Ready to continue?